At number 10, we have a pretty obscure and short-lived armor that appears in Fantastic Four number 375, only 25 issues after his true self is finally revealed. So why does he already need a suit upgrade after 25 issues? Well, to absorb the power of a Watcher, of course. Watchers, if you don't know, are one of the most powerful, omnipotent, and oldest beings in the cosmos. We all know that Dr. Doom's abilities allow him to absorb powers from others, but to have a specific suit made so he could actually absorb a Watcher is a huge step in the right direction for him and a huge step in the wrong direction for the good guys. It's unclear why his normal armor couldn't absorb the likes of a Watcher without an upgrade, but it seems to be due to the fact that this armor is just stronger. And it also has spikes on it, which is always cool. Alright, at number 9 is a pretty fun one. Are you ready? Doom the Living Planet. Okay, this is the suit of all suits. He is literally a planet. Now, this takes the definition of suit to a new place for this list, and it's important we hash this out now. I'm considering any change of appearance of Doom as a new suit as long as his abilities change and or the new appearance also gives him added useful advantages. So, how Dr. Doom finds himself in this position, turning into a planet, is that he's basically getting older and senses that he's gonna die soon. So he basically morphs with the powers of Ego the Living Planet and buys himself more time in existence, in the form of, once again, a planet who wipes out life on Earth entirely, or the humans at least. But what makes this suit, it's a suit, alright? I'm putting my foot down on that. What makes this suit so useful is that aside from it granting so much power that he can take out all of humanity, it grants him more time to live in his old age. So granting extended life sort of surpasses the term useful and goes into the territory of amazing, unmatched, unfairly beneficial. It also allows Doom to spend more time scheming and finding ways to push his agenda and make everyone else's lives just a little harder. Alright, at number 8 is the Power Cosmic suit. In Fantastic Four issue 60, Dr. Doom steals the Power Cosmic from the Silver Surfer, which gives him a huge boost in powers and abilities, naturally. If you're unfamiliar with the Power Cosmic, basically it's a source of almost limitless power, originally honed by Galactus himself, and given Dr. Doom's ability to absorb the power of others, of course his sights are set on gaining this enormous advantage from the Silver Surfer. The only reason why this suit isn't higher up on the list is because it's arguable that these abilities aren't synonymous with the suit he's wearing for his short time wielding the Power Cosmic. However, he does gain an accessory that would argue counts as part of his suit, and that is the Silver Surfer's board. Although for the span of only 2 issues, Dr. Doom is able to fly around the world at unmatched speeds, absorb basically any energy near him, create energy blasts from nothing, and manipulate matter like he is a god. I mean, he arguably is a god for this time, but even if all he acquired was the Silver Surfer's board, that's still a huge benefit that would still put him on this list. Next up at number 7 is the Secret Wars number 1 armor. This armor gains a sleek design and a more vast power set after he absorbs the powers of the Beyonder. During this storyline, the Beyonder takes basically every superhero and supervillain and places them into a world called Battle World to face off for a prize of their choosing. So, as they all start to fight, Dr. Doom sets his sights elsewhere. He decides to focus on the Master of Ceremonies himself, the Beyonder, and he gets what he wants, absorbing the Beyonder's nearly limitless power and transforming into a giant version of himself. This also changes his armor to be more streamlined as well, making him all around more capable of taking on foes in this Hunger Games-esque world. He even uses his newfound power to blast none other than Captain America to smithereens, and also Kang the Conqueror, along with a few other superheroes. He's basically a god, and this suit only sits further back on this list because it may not be the suit itself giving him the extra advantage here, but his armor does change in appearance with his newfound power, so the rules I said earlier still apply. So even if this power comes first, it's forever attached to this particular Dr. Doom suit from this storyline. Fight me on it in the comments. I'll reply to you. Okay, at number 6, we have the suit worn by Victor Von Doom during the Secret Wars 2 storyline. This time, the multiverse is at stake, and multiple versions of Earth are in danger of colliding with one another, so the heroes and villains alike are tasked with trying to stop this from happening naturally. And with Dr. Doom being one of the most powerful out of all of them, he decides to take the lead on this project. But what really gives him the extra boost and lands this suit near the top of the list is when Molecule Man basically endows him with the power to manipulate pretty much any matter that exists in reality in any way that he wants. And when he's given this strength, his suit also changes its look, giving Doom the new moniker of God Emperor Doom. This suit has a sweet silver design, making Dr. Doom look more like an actual god than ever before. And for good reason too, because he sort of is. And lots of godlike suits on this list so far. Anyway, when Namor and Black Panther try to take him on, they think they've killed him with a spear throw, because he explodes into little pieces. But, much to their dismay, he regenerates, muttering something like, "Ouch, that hurt." This is a brand new level for Victor Von Doom, who can also create whole planets now from nothing, which he does in an attempt to solve the collapsing multiverse. And, well, do we all agree that this is due to the suit he wears? Maybe not. But he rips Thanos' spine out of his body with his bare hands. So I felt like I had to put this iteration of Doom on the list. His suit changes, and maybe Molecule Man endowed the suit with abilities instead of Victor himself. A stretch, once again. Let's fight it out in the comments. At number 5 is the Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn. As if this villain wasn't enough of a contender for Spidey to deal with before, he actually takes on the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the Red Goblin, as mentioned before. This makes him nearly unstoppable, forcing the good guys to employ anti-venom on him in order to take him out for good. And even though he has since gone back to being the Green Goblin, the character takes another turn that makes him unrecognizable from his past self during the events of Kindred Rising. And by unrecognizable, I mean that he's now working with Spider-Man. When Sin Eater cleanses Norman of his sins, his allegiances change and he becomes a hero. At number 4 we have Dr. Doom. These days, Dr. Doom has taken on some pretty unstoppable powers that some would even describe as being godlike. Big fans of Victor Von Doom might have expected him to reach a point like this at some point because of his insatiable hunger for power, but as of 2022, he's already surpassed at least my expectations of what he was capable of. Although they haven't stuck around until the time that we're posting this, he has taken the powers of the Silver Surfer and even the Beyonder, giving him a whole new mantle of God Emperor Doom during the Secret Wars storyline. Just for scale, this gave Dr. Doom the ability to piece together broken pieces of the universe after the multiversal collapse. And that's a pretty crazy glow up if you ask me. And even if he doesn't hold quite that much power these days, having had that ability has changed the character forever, if you ask me. At number 3 is Darkseid. Originally introduced as a nearly unstoppable supervillain and one of the most powerful in the whole DC universe, Darkseid's powers have been dumbed down quite a bit since then. Although he appears the same, his immense power level just isn't the same these days as it always was. For example, his eye beams were originally meant to kill his targets in one hit, but these days, they don't by any means take out their targets in one hit. He used to be almost unbeatable, but it seems like heroes are making easier work of him than ever as of late. This is probably a result of him appearing more often in the comics, because if he'd kept his same unstoppable status, his appearances would have to be regulated, or else our heroes would be out of commission in the blink of an eye. At number 2 is Anti-Monitor. Another case of a villain getting nerfed. Anti-Monitor's gotten it bad these days. If you thought Darkseid got taken down a notch, just think how much room there would be to do the same with Anti-Monitor, because he is, after all, the most powerful being in the DC multiverse. Just to get an idea of what I mean, back in the day, Anti-Monitor takes out multiple universes alone before he reaches ours, and then once he does, it takes a hell of a lot to take him down. In fact, it became one of the most notable moments in all of the DC comics when they did, because it was so difficult. But when he returns from his defeat and joins the Sinestro Corps, he just seems to be in a totally different echelon of power, a lesser one, to the point where the Justice League can take him out on their own these days, which is just weird to see for fans who knew his power level back in the day. At number 1 is the Batman Who Laughs. Enough with the downgrades, because this guy's change is a glow up if I've ever seen one. These days, the Batman Who Laughs has gained so much power that he's known to be basically godlike, and he finds these new powers in the place that he comes from, the Dark Multiverse. After finding a Dr. Manhattan powered Batman in the Dark Multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs gets his mind mind transferred into the body of that hero, acquiring the greater part of Dr. Manhattan's abilities, but with the sinister touch of his usual self as well. The only way that he's able to be taken down is when Wonder Woman finds a way to match his power level herself and defeats him despite his insane power boost.
Number 10. Goblin King. What would happen if Norman Osborn got his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet? Well, this is a hypothetical future that does exist somewhere in the multiverse that we get to explore via the What If Infinity Dark Reign one-shot comic. Now, this comic combines the two events of Infinity and Dark Reign to give us a future where Norman Osborn not only creates and leads his own Dark Avengers team as head of a new government operation in the place of S.H.I.E.L.D. known as Hammer, but also a reality where he manages to get his hands, or more specifically his hand, on the Infinity Gauntlet, complete with its matching set of Infinity Stones. Mainly, Norman uses this gauntlet to fight against the heroes who would still oppose him and his team, but also to deal with some, well, honestly, some daddy issues. You see, Norman's dad seemingly never loved him, and also was actually really mean to Norman, to be fair, and so Norman wants to prove to his father how great he is now, and rub his face in the fact that the son he thought would never amount to anything is now in essence the ruler of the universe. However, this doesn't work out exactly as Norman had planned in this, hypothetical, this alternate universe, and actually ends up backfiring on him in the end. I'm not gonna spoil it because it's a pretty fun twist, but you should check it out. It's a good little one shot. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not subscribe? Do it. Click that subscribe button. It helps me out, it helps you out, helps the planet out. It's just good for everybody, really. Number 9. Goddess Selene. During the Necrotia story arc, Selene Gallio became more than the Black Queen. She sought to also become a goddess over life and death, but really more focusing on the death part, after aiming to gain the ability to basically devour all life on Earth. I mean, she is like a psychic vampire after all, so it kind of makes sense. To do so, she had to perform a blood sacrifice with a specific dagger belonging to her, which she ended up having to recapture. She succeeded in doing this, and for a moment, she actually seemed pretty unstoppable. However, Warpath ends up defeating Selene in the end by using her own dagger to defeat her, causing her to explode into blinding beams of light, with her seemingly also dying. Selene, however, does survive this and later, of course, will return. Even before Selene aimed to become a goddess, she was extremely powerful and worshipped as one, being a super powerful type of immortal mutant known as an external. But Necrotia really was an upgrade in the sense that her godhood wasn't just a title based on her standard power set, but a title earned through enhancing her powers. She also basically had like an undead mutant army, so that in of itself is also an upgrade. Number 8. Mirror Master. Mirror Master is one of the rogues, the Flash's team of villains that he often has to combat against. Like the other members of the rogues on Prime Earth, Mirror Master also ended up getting superpowers. Unsatisfied with just their weapons, feeling that the rogues were too easily defeated again and again, Captain Cold, their leader, devised a plan to give himself and his team members real superpowers by having their DNA blended together with their weapons, thereby making their abilities inherent. For Mirror Master, this ended up backfiring initially with him being trapped within the mirror world. However, eventually his girlfriend and current fiancé in the DC universe, Lisa Snart, sister of Captain Cold and currently a rogue herself known as Golden Glider, who accidentally also ended up getting powers, saved Sam. Once free of the mirror world, Sam made himself a mirror gun to use as a way to go in and out of the mirror world, which his powers now allowed him to control. So basically, at first it was a setback, but later, with the help of a new mirror gun, it became an asset and an upgrade, I'd say. And of course with the help of Lisa, because he wouldn't be free without Lisa's help. Number 7. Spiral. Spiral is just so cool and so scary actually as a villain, and yet we don't talk about her as much as we probably should here. But on this list, she should fit right in, considering that her even being a villain is kind of in part as a result of upgrades that were inflicted upon her. Spiral wasn't always evil. She actually used to be a normal human woman who happened to be a stunt performer. She did not become evil until later on in her history, being set down that path after being attacked by her villainous six-armed future self, actually. She fell in love with Longshot as a result of this attack as well, and decided to return home to the Mojoverse with him, which ended up being, all in all, a pretty bad decision. Longshot actually was quickly defeated upon their return, and Rita, aka Spiral, ended up in the hands of a villain even worse than her future self, the vile Mojo, whom the Mojoverse of course is named after. Mojo kept Rita prisoner for years and eventually had her heavily heavily modified and brainwashed, forcing her to become his loyal ally and lackey, known as Spiral, while giving her 4 more arms. She ended up being driven mad and was taught in the ways of magic spells, which she often casts by dancing. She also was trained in the intricacies of body modification so that she could later modify her own helpless victims, as had been done to her by Mojo. Number 6. Trickster Rex. Trickster is one of the rogues, but we aren't here to talk about a melding of weapons to his own DNA in order to give him powers or anything like that. We are here to talk about the Strength Force. It is like the Speed Force, but a conduit of a different type of energy. Instead of being about speed, I mean, it's obviously about strength, so yeah. Although it does focus on similar principles in comparison to the Speed Force when we're talking at least about, I would say, physics. The Strength Force is apparently all about gravity manipulation and the manipulation of force of motion, which can obviously then be used to make you seem and feel and act stronger, if you happen to tap into, of course, the Strength Force. For Trickster, this resulted in increased bone density and muscle mass, making him bigger and stronger than he was previously. A lot bigger, a lot stronger, becoming more monstrous in appearance. After becoming a host for the Strength Force, Trickster referred to himself instead by the name of Trickster Rex.
Number 5. Moonshade. As an evil cosmic doppelganger of Moon Knight, Moonshade is a pretty tough villain for the Fist of Khonshu. What makes him even worse is the fact that he is buffed with a portion of the power of a doppelganger of Franklin Richards, allowing him to travel through the multiverse, destroying and absorbing the powers of all the other versions of Moon Knight, causing our 616 Moon Knight to go on a wild multiversal chase to stop this guy from becoming an all-powerful evil version of Moon Knight. It's pretty bonkers. This guy was created by Magnus, who himself was a doppelganger of Adam Warlock, alongside a group of other Avenger doppelgangers in Infinity War number 3. Doppelgangers are normally easy, cheap villains, but this one is actually pretty cool. Number 4. Stained Glass Scarlet. Scarlet Facinera is one of those characters that I can kind of understand when she goes to the dark side. In fact, it's kind of hard to say she even turned to the dark side at all. Scarlet did not have a great childhood. She had a not so nice father who she actually brought to a crispy end with a cigarette bedsheet combo. Eventually, she got married to a husband who was involved in crime and also did not treat her very nicely. He didn't last very long either. Then, their son, Joseph, also turned to a life of crime, which forced her hand to bring him to an end too. Her own son. Yikes. She clearly wasn't very stable. After her son was gone, she became a vigilante, hunting down the people responsible for her son's life of crime. But you can't go around de-lifing people. That brings you into direct conflict with Moon Knight. After her vacation from life, she became a bit of a legend, which resulted in her being resurrected as a minor god capable of controlling shards of glass. Number 3. The Committee. And now for something completely different. You see, the Committee isn't actually a villain. It's a group of villains, that same shady group of villains that hired the Taskmaster for the task of mastering Moon Knight, which he failed. These guys aren't even supervillains. No, the Committee is made up of shady businessmen, political figures, and financial leaders who are trying to influence events of the world in their monetary favor. A pretty classic sinister motive, and one that feels pretty real world, honestly. It was the Committee that actually first hired Moon Knight to take out the Werewolf by Night in Moon Knight's first appearance back in Werewolf by Night number 10 in 1973. The Committee is powerful in a non-super way, and even in Moon Knight's long fight against them, he has not found a way to bring them down. Not yet. Number 2. Sun King. As a representation of Amon-Ra, Khonshu's father and rival, the man known as Patient 86 is a pretty powerful supervillain for Moon Knight, and was the main villain for the 2016 Moon Knight story, going from Moon Knight issue number 188 to issue 200. As the representation of the rival of Khonshu, Sun King vowed to destroy his opponent and equal Moon Knight. To achieve his goal, he even teamed up with number 10, Raoul Bushman, and together they manipulated and threatened Mark's girlfriend Marlene, messing with Mark and his multiple personalities, and using Beatrice, Mark and Marlene's daughter. He attacked Mark on a more personal level than most other villains had done before, and even caused him to doubt everything he knew. But being the hero, Mark got back to power with the help of all of his personalities and won the day, and helped Patient 86 to a mental facility for treatment. Number 1. Khonshu. Whoa, what? Khonshu? Isn't Mark the fist of Khonshu? Yes he is. But Khonshu doesn't always treat Mark so great. I figured that this would make a really interesting top spot. The amount of distrust that Mark has for his patron god is not unwarranted. Khonshu may have saved Mark's life, but he was likely also manipulating Mark to even be in this position for years and years. He often manipulates Mark for his own plans and schemes, and in the age of Khonshu, it's heavily implied that he used Moon Knight to take over the whole planet and steal the powers of many different heroes, including Thor, Ghost Rider, Iron Fist, and Doctor Strange. In the newest Moon Knight stories, Mark has even rejected the god himself, but still fights in the name of his ideals, having established the Midnight Mansion, protecting travelers of the night.
Number 10. Red Goblin. Well, we've recently got a glimpse at a new Red Goblin who also seems to be more heroic in nature. Normie, the grandson of Norman Osborn. There was also a time when the Carnage symbiote was attached to another, much more sinister presence, Norman Osborn himself. Norman Osborn is typically known for his goblin persona, one of, if not the, arch nemesis to Spider-Man, depending on, I guess, your own opinion. I feel like some people might say Doc Ock is, I personally would say Norman is, but you know, to each their own. However, there was a time when Norman was no longer the Goblin, having been forcefully cured against his will. In order to reclaim his Goblin abilities and persona, he teamed up with Carnage, as Carnage could help the serum work on Norman once more. Bonding together, they became Red Goblin, a terrifying enemy who succeeded in killing Flash Thompson, and almost also defeated Spider-Man himself. In fact, they would have defeated him if it weren't for Peter's own wit, as he convinced Norman to ditch the Carnage symbiote or risk having to share his victory over Spider-Man. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when villains get super powerful upgrades, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Captain Cold. The leader of the rogues in the DC Prime Earth universe, or at least one of the leaders, Leonard Snart became frustrated that his and his team's tech were not enough to defeat the Flash. As a result, he made a plan to use their weapons in order to imbue them all with powers. They did this by infusing their DNA with their own powers, blending their weapons with themselves in order to give themselves powers, although really this was kind of Captain Cold's decision himself. Everybody else didn't really have as much of a say. While this worked out well for Captain Cold, who gained cryokinesis powers, it did not work as well for some of the other members, who did gain powers, but ones that cost them in terms of their individual lives, being less easily controlled and manipulated as Leonard's, at least in some cases. Number 8. Lady Deathstrike. I mean, if you know the story of Lady Deathstrike, then I'm sure her upgrades won't be super unbelievable, but also if you know the story of Lady Deathstrike, then her villain upgrades may actually still be pretty unbelievable, because I feel like her story itself is unbelievable. Her origin story is just such a sad one that once you know about how she became a villain, you're probably going to be somewhat shocked and also feel for her, despite all the horrible and unforgivable things she has done as a villain. I know I personally have felt for her, and I think her story is super tragic, so let's get into that. Yuriko Oyama is the daughter of Kenji Oyama, a brilliant scientist but cruel father who actually invented the adamantium bonding process and was known as the criminal overlord Lord Darkwind. He created the adamantium bonding process and then it was stolen from him. Despite the fact that Yuriko was frequently mistreated by her father and even given a permanent face scar by him, which he gave to all his children, how nice, as a reflection of his own facial scarring that he suffered as a result of a World War II battle, Yuriko would eventually grow to emulate him anyways. Initially, she despised her father and even ended up killing him while protecting the hero Daredevil, which you'd think means that she would grow up to, you know, become a hero and do some good stuff. However, even once free of her father physically, she could not escape his hold on her mentally. Her lover, one of his assassins, who was blindly devoted to him, ended up taking his own life following Lord Darkwind's death. This caused a shift in Yuriko, who then set out to carry on her father's legacy instead of condemning him, which you'd think she would have, cybernetically enhancing her entire body and continuing to upgrade it more and more as time went on. And that's how she kind of becomes basically a major Wolverine villain, because she's all like, that adamantium bonding process, I must get Wolverine and take it back of my father's legacy. Number 7. Heatwave. Heatwave was another of the rogues who was part of the genome experiment to have their DNA combined with that of their weapons. However, Captain Cold's transformation was much less horrifying, I'd say, than Heatwave's. Like Captain Cold, Mick Rory's weapon was also elemental in nature, with his being a heat gun as opposed to a cold gun. His DNA combined with his weapon gave him pyrokinesis abilities, which looked like they were pretty terrifying to him initially, as his whole body ignited in flames. Not gonna lie, I'd also be pretty afraid of that. That doesn't sound like great powers to me. I do not like fire, so I like to be a fair distance away from fire. Safety. Number 6. Absolute Carnage. During the Absolute Carnage event, Carnage received one of the most epic upgrades ever, especially considering at the time, he was pretty dead. Carnage had returned to Earth from space and in essence basically burned up on re-entry. Despite the symbiote's aim to try and keep its host, Cletus Cassidy, safe, the two entities combined as one both perished on their return. However, this wouldn't be the end for them, because they would be resurrected by a cult that worshipped the god of symbiotes, Null, seeking to appease and awaken him. And also because it's Carnage, and Carnage can never stay dead even when you're like, but there's no way he could come back now, right? He still comes back. Carnage would be revived using the Grendel symbiote, making him extremely powerful, especially as he continued along on his mission to devour and collect the codices of all symbiote hosts, located in their spines, whether these hosts were superpowered or not, alive or dead. All in all, it was a very scary time. Number 5. Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh. Does sound silly though, ya Nimrod. Skillful Hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of Sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all but extinct in this future. Number 4. Extant. The thing about time-traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of Extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's Extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself. Number 3. Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff, apparently. Number 2. Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics, being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force. There is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind. Number 1. Kang the Conqueror. While Kang might look a little silly in the comics with his, his purple helmet and his floating time chair, he is not someone who should be underestimated. Kang hails from the 30th century, where he is believed to either be the descendant of Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, or Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. He is known as Nathaniel Richards in his original future reality of Earth 6311, where he hails from. In fact, a young Nathaniel Richards would go on to become Iron Lad while running from his future self Kang, only to learn that he actually needed to become Kang, or would actually kind of risk the destruction of time and the multiverse itself. That is maybe the most powerful element of Kang. He's like a Marvel absolute, and even though young Nathaniel wanted to become a hero and in essence defeat Kang, he had to accept his destiny or risk destroying multiple universes that have been shaped by a version of Kang and his actions. Kang is basically like integral. If you don't have Kang, everything dies, but if you have Kang in the reality, he's probably gonna try to mess with you. It's like, there's no good answer to Kang.
At number 10 is Despero. Although Despero has always been totally jacked, he was originally known as more of a threat to the Justice League through mind manipulation. During the Silver Age, he would only typically use his telepathic powers before anything else, but these days, it's a different story. Although these changes did start to take place way back in the 80s, the character has come a long way since the days when he would sit on his throne and twiddle his fingers most of the time. Now, he seems to do a lot of the grunt work himself, even looking larger in size these days than ever before. And even outside of the comics, Despero's appearance in the Arrowverse offers a totally different look into the villain. He takes on a human form for much of the time, who is, well, let's just say he's not as big as Despero, nor does he have much musculature to him, no offense to that actor. Nor does he have a third eye or anything that a comic book fan would expect, and when he's in proper form, he just seems a lot less demonic and cunning, more like Hellboy's very serious detective older brother or something like that. At number 9, we have Anton Arcane. The penultimate villain to Swamp Thing, Anton Arcane has always been a threat as one of the most prolific evil scientists in all of DC. But when Swamp Thing finally kills Anton during one of their many confrontations, back in 2016 I think, the villain goes to hell and basically becomes a demon. Having been a pretty tame foe for most of the Swamp Thing comics, Anton Arcane's physical changes have made him almost unrecognizable now that he's a demon. And what's worse is that he continues to bother Swamp Thing and his niece Abigail, but now with the added demonic powers in mind. So he's changed quite a bit, both in looks and power set. At number 8, we have Psycho Pirate. The way that this villain has changed since the Infinite Crisis event is unmatched. Although he looks relatively the same, he's gained such a power boost that he now works with the likes of Darkseid and Alexander Luthor. After surviving the crisis, he comes out on top, getting his hands on what's known as the Medusa Mask. And what this helps him do is basically summon beings from the old multiverse, which, as you can imagine, is a very powerful ability, especially directly following the event itself. And even though he's been killed by Black Adam during the events of Blackest Night, Psycho Pirate's corpse is brought back to life as a Black Lantern. And as you can imagine, this gives him a whole new look and increases his power level. He loses the Medusa Mask in this ghoulish form, but even without it, he appears totally different than how we're used to seeing him. At number 7, we have Doomsday. The primary change with Doomsday isn't something that's been gained, but something that's been lost. A very notable power of his, actually, and that is his hyper adaptability ability. In fact, I would even argue that this was his main power, and what it meant was he could learn from past losses in battle and change his physiology to prevent himself from being killed in the same way twice. I don't know why this has been dropped, because aside from it being the defining characteristic of Doomsday, it was just a really fun ability to watch, because it made every encounter with the villain a new challenge for the heroes, which would ultimately make for an exciting read. But for whatever reason, reason, this power has basically been left in the dust, making Doomsday that much less unique from any other Bruiser type villain, at least in my opinion. At number 6 we have Dr. Octopus. Something that the less avid readers may not know about this villain is that he's been going back and forth between heroism and villainy for some time now. And not only that, Otto Octavius has recently taken on the mantle of Spider-Man, donning the superior Spider-Man armor outfitted with the mechanical arms and everything. He's also been taken over by Venom recently, as well as the Carnage symbiote. Although he's known to be back to his evil ways and his classic suit in 2022, there is no telling if he'll jump back into the Spidey suit once more. He's already gone back and forth a number of times, even in the last few years, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did it again.
Number 5. Cheetah. I mean, the Cheetah outfit has changed a lot since her first appearance, and so has the character. The first Cheetah villain we were ever introduced to in the pages of 1943's Wonder Woman issue number 6 is no longer the Cheetah we have in comics. Literally. Much has changed about the character, including her identity, her origin, and her overall look and power set. The original Cheetah was Priscilla Rich, a jealous debutante who dressed up in a skin-tight cheetah onesie. It's a look, I gotta say. Now we have Barbara Minerva as the main cheetah, who instead of dressing up actually has a humanoid cheetah form, having been transformed basically by a god. Very different looks and takes on this character, but I definitely say that Minerva's is better overall. Sorry Priscilla, it's just cooler. Like, I mean, then you get to actually kind of fight like a cheetah lady, as opposed to just a lady in a cheetah costume. Number 4. Crime Syndicate. The Crime Syndicate have always been cool, but over the years their looks have gotten a lot more detailed, badass, and in some cases, a lot hotter. I'm here for the sexy Crime Syndicate, I must say. I'm feeling it. The Crime Syndicate are actually one of the earliest villain teams to take on the Justice League, making their first appearance in 1964 in Justice League of America issue number 29. At least the earlier continuity version of that team, that is. Because this is DC we're talking about here, so you know, now we're on Prime Earth and that was before that, but anyways. Back then their outfits were less sleek and more blocky, such was the time. They were also a lot less sexy back then overall as a team, and had a lot less independent flair, with their looks being just a little bit more rough and basically similar adaptations of the team members that they were mirroring. I mean, Owlman literally has Batman's look from like the neck down almost exactly, with only the Stark owl on his head setting him apart. It's a look. Number 3. Kang the Conqueror. Okay, so Kang still looks pretty crazy, even in the comics, but he's come a long way from that wild purple and green eyesore when it comes to his cinematic appearance at least. We saw our first, likely of many, Kangs in the Disney Plus streaming series Loki. Here Kang was played by the amazing Jonathan Majors, and instead of sporting his very blue face and purple helmet, he was dressed simply in a nice purple robe with green tunic, pants, and sandals underneath. A nice nod to the original design while still providing its own unique take on his look, and a take that is quite a bit more sensible and stylish. Still, an air of flamboyance in how he's dressed, but not so over the top that it undermines how intense, inevitable, and intimidating He Who Remains, aka an alternate Kang, appears to be here. Number 2. Lex Luthor. Lex looks a lot cooler and a lot more dapper in modern comics than his original appearance. Remember when he used to wear a purple suit with green pants? What is it with villains in purple and green? Especially over at DC. What's going on over there? It's kind of a very shocking combo of colors, especially for someone like Lex. Although I will admit, put it into a mech type suit, gloss it up a bit, and it works a little better for me. I do like it. Lex used to wear this purple suit with straps crossed over it, and a very Dracula-esque high collar with bright green pants and purple boots. Fortunately, he now more keeps to suit and tie looks, looking a lot more polished and refined, and occasionally mixes in some badass mechanical armor, which makes him look a lot more intimidating than that collar ever did. Number 1. Killmonger. Talk about villains who have seen an upgrade. In Jungle Action issue number 6, we got our first look at Killmonger. I don't even think you'd recognize him today if your main experience with this character came from the Marvel Cinematic Universe film Black Panther and Michael B. Jordan's portrayal of him. The original look for Killmonger involved a lot of spikes, as opposed to a lot of horrifying scars. He didn't initially mark himself for his kills, instead He was just really pointy. He also wore white pants and a red sash, with no shirt initially. We've come a long way since then, with Killmonger having even been to space and back, where he ruled over the Wakandan Space Empire. And thankfully his look has changed quite a lot since then. I'm partial to his symbiote look personally, still a little spiky, but you know, it doesn't overdo it. Nothing wrong with a little bit of spikes, you just don't want to have too many.
Number 10. Raoul Bushman. We're gonna start this list off right, with probably the oldest and longest time foe to Moon Knight and Mark Spector. Raoul Bushman was a mercenary that hired Mark Spector and pals for a while, until Bushman turned on them after Mark's conscience didn't like the idea of ending archaeologists' lives for the treasure they discovered. This was actually the inciting incident that had Mark chosen by Khonshu in Moon Knight #1 back in 1980. Raoul doesn't have any powers, just a very particular set of skills. Specifically, Bushman is an expert swordsman, marksman, and unarmed combatant. And he has a ton of experience in guerrilla warfare and battle tactics. Oh, he's also been brought back from the afterlife twice, and even though he has been beaten so many times by Moon Knight that he has developed an eating problem, he keeps coming back for more. Number 9. Black Spectre. As a veteran of the Vietnam War, Carson Knowles didn't have things too great upon his return to America. Not a lot of people were fans of these veterans, which is a little unfair. He barely could keep himself supported with his job, and then he found out his son had passed over the phone. Carson snapped. He beat a mugger to the threshold of living and turned on the whole world for how poorly he was treated and for the passing of his son. He became Black Spectre, and one of the first longtime villains of Moon Knight. From Moon Knight 25 in 1982 to Moon Knight Volume 5 number 19 in 2008. Interestingly though, Black Spectre doesn't really have any powers either, similar to Mr. Bushman. Just a knack for planning, some political power, and a strong driving force. While not anywhere near the most powerful, he does have an awesome costume. Number 8. Taskmaster. Anthony Masters is not specifically a Moon Knight villain. He's more like an everybody villain. Well, everyone who is a street level martial artist at the very least. Taskmaster is hired by whoever is paying the highest amount, and his photogenic reflexes allow him to match or beat most opponents. He has fought Moon Knight after the Superhuman Registration Act was brought into place, when he was hired by a powerful shadowy group of villains who will appear later on in this list. Unfortunately for Anthony, his power does not let him copy moves that utilize other superpowers, which gives Moon Knight and other heroes a bit of an edge. Hey there, travelers of the night. I am not anywhere as cool as Moon Knight. It's true. But if you're at least enjoying me or this video so far, let us know with a like, comment, or even a subscribe. Alright, on to the rest. Number 7. Morpheus. You know, I didn't know a lot about Moon Knight until recently, and I'm so glad, because he actually has some really cool, scary, and interesting villains. Robert Markham suffered from a viral infection. He was prescribed an experimental substance that alters his DNA, making him look very different, and causes him not to need or want sleep. Due to his lack of sleep, he developed extremely potent psionic abilities. I kinda doubt that's how insomnia works, but whatever. Robert, now calling himself Morpheus after the Greek god of dreams, swears revenge on the doctor who prescribed the experimental substance that did this to him. And Moon Knight is there to stop him. He's got really unique powers, and you should check him out. Number 6. Shadow Knight. Shadow Knight is actually Randall Spector, the younger brother of Mark Spector. He was poked with a bullet and left in Egypt, assuming he was abandoned by his brother and Raoul Bushman. When he returned, he started going on a spree of de-lifing, targeted at nurses as bait to bring out his older brother. Randall wanted the power of Khonshu blessed upon Mark, but was denied, which drove him to become really jealous. Like, really jealous. He underwent chemical treatments while working with Nephthys. That pushed him even further into insanity and obsession with removing and replacing his own brother. He comes so close to achieving this goal so many different times.
Number 5. Infinity Ultron. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe animated series from Disney Plus titled What If, Infinity Ultron was revealed as being the main boss at the end of that first season, with all the heroes from alternate realities who were previously introduced in previous episodes having to band together to become the Watcher's Guardians of the Multiverse. In the end, end, Infinity Ultron is defeated, being forced to erase himself. However, for a while there, he actually threatened the very fabric of reality, thanks to him retrieving and assembling the Infinity Stones. However, I will say, I don't think we have much to fear in the comic book world from a threat like this. I think the Infinity Stones, or as they were previously known, the Infinity Gems, typically actually have a rule in the comics where they can only affect the reality they're from, so traveling through the multiverse with them wouldn't really work in the comics, because then, you'd go to another reality and then they'd just be useless, so yeah. Number 4. Cheetah the God Killer. Remember when Cheetah got her hands on the God Killer blade? I remember. It was a wild time in comics. This all happened as part of the Year of the Villain event. At the end of issue number 75 of Wonder Woman Volume 5, the 2016 volume, Cheetah ends up being led to the God Killer blade by Lex Luthor's drone. He urges her to follow his drone so he might lead her to the blade, but before that refused to tell her anything before they actually came upon it. Pretty trusting, actually, I would say, to just follow that drone blindly. Mainly, I assume this was done not for any actual reason towards Cheetah, but also to make us, eager to turn the page and be like, where's the drone going? After being given the God Killer, Cheetah is ready to once more confront her nemesis, Wonder Woman. But Lex also urges her not only to go after Wonder Woman and kill her, but also all of the Amazons. The God Killer blade that Cheetah receives as a gift from Luthor is specifically tied to her own genetic pattern, thanks to a nanotech modification. For those unfamiliar with this weapon, it is insanely powerful and can basically shapeshift to accommodate whoever uses it and whatever they specifically need it for, and can easily do damage to even the most durable of superpowered beings or the most divine. When damaged, the blade itself is also capable of self-repairing. So this is a pretty crazy upgrade for Cheetah. Number 3. Joker, King of the World. Well, we already talked about a period where Joker gained reality warping powers on part 1 of this list. This isn't the only time that the Joker has gotten such power. No. In fact, weirdly, this has even happened, I would say, more than twice in comics. It's happened a few times. I wanted to give a shout out and a thank you here to Corey Graves from the comment section on our first part to this video, who actually suggested this specific occurrence of when this happened, during the Batman vs. the Incredible Hulk crossover comic. So thank you for shouting that out. It allowed me to go back and be like, oh yeah, that happened, and it was so cool. Here, Joker gains an upgrade via an alliance when he allies himself with the Shaper of Worlds. The Shaper of Worlds is actually from Marvel Comics and is a being who can create extremely powerful illusions, which in essence are so real that they appear to shape reality. I mean, you could say he just shapes reality, but they are based in illusion, so I just thought I'd give you some info. The Shaper of Worlds can do this on a planetary level, which is pretty wild. Joker teams up with the Shaper in order to help the being cure their madness, and in exchange, the Shaper will basically make the Joker's dreams come true, making him king of the world. Having finally found the mind that the Shaper was looking for, one unique in all the universe with great ambitions and dreams. Apparently everyone else is dreaming way too small. Fortunately, Batman and the Hulk, while initially pitted against one another, by the end of the comic managed to team up and defeat both of these foes. Yay. Well, sort of. I mean, they definitely defeat Joker. The Shaper kinda just is like, I'm blasting off again, bye! Number 2. God Emperor Doom. God Emperor Doom is one of my favorite villain upgrades of all time, because with God Emperor Doom also comes his own battle world and all the alternate characters and stories which reside within it. It's a cool story that took over and affected all of Marvel, a little story known as Secret Wars. How did Dr. Doom become God Emperor Doom? Well, this was a result of the incursions, kind of. While confronting the Beyonders, no one but Doom was really willing to take on their power and save everything. In so doing, he became the new ruler of the multiverse, and in order to save it from all of the incursion collisions that were happening, created his own reality which combined all of the universes together, becoming its ruler and its god. Doom also held this power largely thanks to Owen Reese, aka Molecule Man, who he kept kinda locked away, hidden away, and used the powers of to make himself like a god. So this wasn't Doom's own inherent power, he was kind of borrowing from Molecule Man. However, in the end, Doom would lose this power in a fight between him and Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, who had survived the destruction of the multiverse in a life raft. Owen would appoint Reed worthy to wield his power, and Reed would use this power, along with the help of his family, to restore the multiverse to normal, restoring most things back to how they were previously, and modifying some elements in an attempt to improve them. In fact, he even gives gives Dr. Doom everything he wanted for a while by making him think the Fantastic Four were gone and, you know, fixing his face for him so he's no longer scarred, which is actually really sweet. Number 1. Zoom. While most people simply know the Speed Force when it comes to origins of powerful forces in the DC universe, it turns out this isn't the only power type that one can get through connecting to forces. There are many different force types in the universe, and the villain Hunter Zolomon, recently known as Zoom, manages to gain access to not just one, but 2 of these additional force types. In fact, actually I think at one point there are 3 additional ones that he's connected to. One of them is the Sage Force, and as it sounds, the Sage Force is like a fount of wisdom, greatly enhancing the intellect of those that it connects to. This gave Solomon super genius level intellect and also granted him psionic powers, including telepathy and telekinesis, which honestly pretty wild, especially because Hunter's already like OP in my mind. Zolomon ended up using Barry Allen and Wally West in order to gain access to and connect with the Sage Force, as he discovered there was a force barrier in his way, which basically prevented these other force types from like coming into the world. He tricked the 2 of them to break this barrier and then was able to gain access himself to multiple forces at once, including the Sage Force. Number 10. Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9. King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more time travel future based lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Kronos. Kronos is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him, and this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. Kronos, not to be confused with Kronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who was an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Kronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain. Number 7. Dr. Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Dr. Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots in my mind as well was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it, which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know. Number 6. Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy. Number 5. Bizarro. Bizarro is a villain who is known for being insanely powerful, as he's kind of like an evil reflection of Superman. Whether that be the version of Bizarro who is like a defective clone or was created to be the opposite of Supes by Lex Luthor, or the version of Bizarro who is in essence an alien from Bizarro World, or Hetrea, where everything is the opposite to our world, to Earth. People speak backwards, bad is considered good, even the formal name of the planet is technically just Earth spelt backwards. Hetrea. Bizarro, however, may be super strong like Superman. That isn't a direct opposite, I guess, although his cold vision is, but he does not share Clark's intellect. Usually Bizarro is presented as being very dumb or simple-minded, at least in comparison to Superman, who is in essence an effortless super genius. However, with Bizarro 2, a defective clone of Superman created by Lex Luthor, he was, for a time, given a genius intellect as well. Unfortunately, this didn't last, but still, a super smart Bizarro is a terrifying, or perhaps, depending on the circumstances, more comforting thing to imagine. Number 4. Madeline Pryor, Queen of Goblins and of Limbo? Madeline Pryor is known as the Queen of Goblins, but did you know that she also recently became the Queen of Limbo? It is true. Now initially in the comics, Maddie was introduced to us as a love interest of X-Men member Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, and herself a normal human, so it would seem, without superpowers, who just happened to look like Jean Grey. From there, we learned that her looking identical to Jean was actually no coincidence, as she was in fact her clone, created by Mr. Sinister himself. Learning of this and tapping into her own power as basically a spark of the Phoenix gave her life, learning of this and tapping into her own power as well as experiencing constant mistreatment by her husband and those she believed she could call her friends, the X-Men, caused Maddie to suffer a mental breakdown, which resulted in her becoming evil, reaching out to the demons of Limbo and making a deal with them, and then kind of becoming the Goblin Queen as we know her. This caused the first Inferno event. After being defeated, initially Maddie would continue to pop up every now and then, often returning as a villain. More recently, she was permanently killed but received a new lease on life when she was resurrected on Krakoa. It seems she was ready to turn over a new leaf and forgive those who had mistreated her in the past, moving forward with her life. How healthy. She became the new Queen of Limbo after Magic sought to retire as ruling monarch of the Hellish Dimension, with Magic even going super far to be like, no, I trust Maddie, I think Maddie will be great. However, we later learn in the Dark Web event that Madeline actually wasn't ready to give up her grudges, as she used her newfound power over Limbo to amass a demon army and once more attack New York City. Turns out her pretending to be over everything was a bit of a ruse because she still had some stuff that she needed to resolve. This too, however, would be resolved, but for a time, Maddie was back to being a villain and with a power boost from Limbo. Number 3. Golden Glider. While Lisa Snart's powers may initially not seem like an upgrade, considering, well, they did leave her in a coma, they're actually insanely powerful, and once she kinda came to embrace them, made her a fairly even match for the Flash, who is also known for being one of the most powerful heroes around. Definitely one of the most powerful heroes in my book. Like the other rogues, Lisa herself also received actual superpowers during the experiment that was conducted to give the members of the team superpowers. In fact, Lisa wasn't actually one of those who intended to gain powers here, but merely got hers by accident, because the whole experiment went a little wonky, there was an explosion, she got caught in the crossfire of that explosion that granted everyone else superpowers, with her astral form being separated from her body and her physical form being rendered comatose. Eventually, she would recover from the explosion, but as Glider in her astral form would go on to recruit her own rogues team, becoming a leader of the team for a while. In her astral form, Lisa is extremely fast, so fast that she can actually appear virtually invisible to most. Not only that, but she can also weaken a speedster's connection to the Speed Force, temporarily disrupting it. See what I mean? Extremely powerful. And Lisa didn't even ask for this upgrade, she didn't even want powers. Number 2. Adamantium Infused Bullseye. Maybe one of the most random upgrades to have happened, maybe not, considering at the time, kinda almost everyone was like getting adamantium, despite the fact that it's, supposed to be a super rare material in the Marvel universe. But hey, there was a time we were obsessed with adamantium. Kinda everyone was getting a little bit, a little piece. Bullseye ended up getting himself some adamantium pieces, some upgrades, which made him an even larger threat to Daredevil in the future. His bones were experimentally infused with the metal substance, or encased, or whatever, making him akin to someone like Wolverine in terms of his durability, and meaning he couldn't just easily be taken out like most human opponents. After all, while Bullseye may be an extremely skilled marksman, possibly the most skilled marksman in the Marvel universe, he was just that, a human with skills. But with the adamantium upgrade, which he received from Lady Deathstrike's father, Lord Darkwind, he was now much more unstoppable and deadly. I will say this, unlike Wolverine, Bullseye does not have a completely coated and infused adamantium skeleton. Only pieces of adamantium coat parts of his skeleton, but this also includes his spine, which is still pretty scarily durable, and I mean your spine is a lot of the things that you need to be durable if you want to do crazy stuff, so you can do some pretty crazy things now. Number 1. Emperor Joker. Emperor Joker has to be one of the most unbelievable villain upgrades we've seen thus far in the comics. Emperor Joker ended up stealing his powers from Mr. Mxyzptlk, the 5th dimensional imp who is sometimes a mischievous villain to Superman, and at other times kind of like an oddball ally, depending on the story and depending on the writers. Mr. Mxyz only planned on giving Joker a small amount of his power, less than 1% I believe of his power. However, the Joker, being the trickster he himself is, managed to trick Mxyz into handing over 99.99% of his power instead. Ugh. Using this power, Joker ended up conquering the world easily, becoming Emperor Joker, even going so far as to literally devour China and making Batman his prisoner, who he would constantly torment and kill every single day, resurrecting him the next day to kind of do this all over again. In fact, Batman was left with no memory of this afterwards, having to have his mind wiped of these events, as otherwise he would have been so tormented by this experience that he would have not been able to continue on as a hero because he would have been broken. That's how bad it was for him. Fortunately, in the end, Superman ended up defeating Emperor Joker, not able to stand against him in terms of power levels. Superman defeated Joker by realizing his weakness, that the Joker really could not go on or continue to exist without Batman, which was why he couldn't bring himself to destroy Batman permanently, and that also meant that he couldn't destroy the universe permanently, so basically that's it. Made him a little unstable, and then they were able to take the power back. Woo! Number 10. Loki. Loki has shifted so much in comics. He's technically a different character from that original Loki that first appeared in Venus issue number 6 and again in Journey into Mystery issue number 85. Loki's look originally was pretty silly, especially if we're talking about trying to adapt that look to the big screen and make it look menacing. We do get a version of that sort of original costume in the Loki series when we see an older, bitter, and sadder Loki who actually more reflects that original costume and that original Loki. Loki now appears to look much cooler in the comics and is also much more versatile when it comes to their style. This has also translated to the big screen, where Tom Hiddleston's Loki has also gotten more and more dapper and stylish as time has gone on as well. At least that's how I see it. Number 9. Harley Quinn. I know people love the original costume, so this might be like kind of a hot take, but I personally think Harley has had so many amazing costumes and looks over the years that have just improved on what was already, well, good. I'm not saying the original costume was bad, to be clear. So yeah, I'm not saying the original costume that she had was at the level of some of the other ones on our list, Loki, being too much, or too ridiculous, but I am saying that I think her design has only really improved with time. It's a compliment, Harley. Take it. Of course, not all of her looks have been winners in comparison to that original look, but I do think that her current outfit has definitely been one of her best that we've seen so far. And then of course there is her whole Birds of Prey looks, which I loved, and her The Suicide Squad DCEU look, which seems to have been inspired by more modern Harley Quinn comics and video game designs. And to be clear, we're talking about James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, not Suicide Squad. Not David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Those are two very different looks, are they not? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about some more cool supervillain redesigns that we love, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The Joker. The Joker is another character who has come a long way when it comes to his different looks. While his iconic face paint has remained, he's had many different outfits over the years, and many different iconic pieces that we would identify as being part of his costume. Purple and green remain the Joker's colors, but instead of wearing a suit with like a ribbon looking tie that kind of reminds me of something like a child would wear, like a kid in the olden days, or some kind of like floppy bolo tie, he is typically seen more in a trench coat that happens to be purple. Also, if anyone knows what that tie is called, it's like a little bow, but it's like a string. Let me know in the comments. I don't know what that's called. I do not know. The Joker looks less ridiculous and more menacing in modern comics, with the pranks of his earlier days also getting twisted along with his appearance. In more modern comic book tales, Joker has also been particularly terrifying, at one point having removed his face and stapled it back on in Death of the Family in 2011, and at another point sporting his own intimidating Joker-inspired batsuit during Joker War in 2020. Both of these are great looks, but very different looks. Number 7. Toad. Toad has also had a lot of different looks throughout the years, with his original one being the most ridiculous. And also fitting, but also so ridiculous. But I'd say the real cool thing about Toad is that a lot of the time his outfits actually really reflect how he's feeling inside and his evolution as a character. This is why at first it's really no surprise that Toad basically is dressed up as a court jester in his first appearances. At that time that was basically what he was, acting as Magneto's often disappointing goon who wanted nothing more than to please his master, but usually kind of failed at doing so. Toad? As time went on, Toad would come to realize that he didn't actually need to settle for Magneto's mistreatment of him, and that he was no longer really indebted to Magneto. In various depictions of the character, he'd become somewhat more independent, and sometimes a lot more Toad-like in terms of his design. Fox X-Men movies, I'm looking at you. And in terms of his roles, he also even went from being a villain at Magneto's side in the comics to kind of a weird ally of the X-Men when he became the school janitor in Wolverine and the X-Men. Remember when that happened? He also at one point got a flaming tongue. So he's changed a lot. I don't know if I'm as here for the weird green flaming tongue, but I definitely feel like his look is a lot better now than it was before. Also like that he's kind of like a hacker now. I think that's cool. Number 6. The Riddler. The Riddler originally looked Jim Carrey levels of Riddler ridiculous when he first appeared in Detective Comics issue 140. And that's not a slight to Jim Carrey, by the way. I still love that version of the Riddler. Just also a side note, when I call things ridiculous or weird, it's not necessarily an insult coming from me. And while I do have respect for the Riddler's original question mark suit, I don't think it's necessary for him to be covered in question marks so that we know he's the Riddler. He likes riddles. We get it. Riddler has had a ton of redesigns since that first appearance, with a good number of his modern takes being much improved on in comparison. Okay, so not all of the modern takes on the Riddler have been great. See Riddler with his hair shaved into a question mark shaped green mohawk. That was a weird time, but overall I think we can say we've seen a marked improvement. I also do love the recent redesign with Paul Dano playing the Riddler in the Batman film. I feel like this design for the character was definitely one of the most terrifying looks for him yet, and also fit really well with his origin and his backstory, and just with the overall tone of that film, which takes inspiration from the comics but very much grounds the character of the Riddler in reality, giving him more power as well in the process. I think. Like when you make it just not about like silly riddles and you make it about like what is the Riddler and why are there riddles and what is this really about? I mean, it's a powerful character.
At number 5, we have the Doom 2099 suit. In the series Doom 2099, Dr. Doom travels to the future to Latveria, the fictional European country that Dr. Doom is normally the ruler of. But somebody named Tiger Wilde is in his place, and his advanced technology is just too much for Dr. Doom to handle, so what does Dr. Doom do? He goes back to the workshop and builds himself what is basically known to be his strongest and most advanced armor yet. Aside from just looking really cool, this suit has a few new upgrades that help him get his old position of power back. This would include a phase shifter, which allows him to pass through solid objects, as well as a cyberspace link built into his armor. This allows him to gain access to cyberspace almost instantly and anywhere he is, as long as he's wearing the armor. Naturally, this helps Doom get his power back as he fights for Latveria alongside his allies. It's impressive what new armor can do to get you back on track, even when you're already one of the most powerful supervillains in the cosmos. Okay, at number 4 is Dr. Doom's Vibranium suit. This suit is put together by Dr. Doom when he swoops into Wakanda and steals a bunch of their Vibranium reserves. For those of you who don't know Vibranium, it's basically a highly durable metal that can absorb sonic energy, basically taking all of the force out of any impact that makes contact with the material. Due to this metal's abilities, it's one of the most valuable in the world, so when Wakanda finds itself vulnerable, Dr. Doom takes advantage and steals a bunch of it. The suit he makes looks pretty cool too, taking on a really menacing look with spikes and a glowing chest piece. But one of the biggest uses for this suit is that it apparently helps the wearer see all of the vibranium in the world. So for someone who's interested in strengthening their own personal weaponry or putting together a powerful army, this suit isn't just beneficial in its power. There's a huge advantage to locating and gaining access to the raw materials needed for a powerful, well-armored army. And Dr. Doom knows this, so his sights are then by all means set on finding more vibranium with this suit's new ability. Luckily for Wakanda, but also sort of sadly for them too, T'Challa is forced to render all the vibranium in the world powerless, making it also useless in its powers, at least for the uses that Dr. Doom had planned for it. But yeah, the Dr. Doom vibranium suit. For the time being, it was pretty dang useful. At number 3 is the Dr. Juggernaut suit from the Heroes Reborn crossover event in 2021. In this storyline, Victor Von Doom is after more riches, but this time specifically the Gem of Sidorak, which, if you know your X-Men lore, is the source that gives Juggernaut his powers. And his look, I guess, because Dr. Doom doesn't just gain the insane super strength of Juggernaut, he also takes on the appearance of the villain as well. This suit is huge, bulky, and gives Doom enough confidence to try and take over the United States of America. He goes in and attacks different locations in Washington, D.C. in the hopes of setting himself up with a new moniker of President of the United States. Why are all these villains always after taking over America? I mean, don't they also find themselves going out into the cosmos to wage war for much greater causes and higher stakes? I guess there's just something about the White House that really gets these guys going. Anyway, this suit is sort of short-lived because Hyperion comes in and banishes Dr. Doom to the negative zone. I guess he just flies a little too close to the sun on this one. I mean, let's be honest. A target is painted right on his back as soon as he pairs up his powers with Juggernaut. They had to put a stop to that before it got out of hand. Next up at number 2 is the 2099 upgraded suit. Yes, believe it or not, there are 2 versions of the Dr. Doom suit in this storyline. As he's pushing to take back Latveria, his allies start to question his abilities and even his identity, wondering if it's truly the real Dr. Doom behind the suit. So, as he finally gets control back over his country, he also decides he wants to take over the US as well. See? That strange obsession with taking over America again. Anyway, in this event, he decides to flaunt his superiority by upgrading his suit again. And above all the abilities that this suit might have, it just looks the coolest out of any others on this list. At this point, he's upgraded his abilities to offer him a remote that automatically activates his time platform for him when he needs it, as well as a return to form with his boombots and the classic shrink ray. He also covers his eye slits with a red glass, making his appearance that much more menacing. And the biggest use of this suit in that crucial moment for Victor, which puts it higher on this list, is the simple yet essential function of galvanizing his troops and reminding them who their true leader is, in a time when he's in danger of losing his followers. Okay, finally at number 1, we have the Dr. Doom infamous Iron Man suit. So, after the events of Civil War II, Dr. Doom's mask has come off, and he's suddenly ready to try and make up for his past evil deeds. And coincidentally, Tony Stark also seems to be ready for a replacement. So Doom makes it his prerogative to take up the role of Iron Man and play hero for a while. The suit he wears as the new infamous Iron Man looks basically sort of how you'd imagine it looking. It's like an upgraded Iron Man suit with the iconic Dr. Doom cloak. But something about this combo just looks so Just so cool. And it appears that it has some pretty unique features as well, like what appears to be a certain level of protection against harm without the suit even being activated yet, which is probably Doom's iconic force field, but mixed with the access to blasts of energy out of his hands and as well as flight and increased strength, it's pretty much a powerhouse having Dr. Doom and Iron Man's abilities mixed all into one suit. Iron Man with force fields, Dr. Doom with jet boots. Need I say more? This suit is definitely something new for Victor and a good way for him to start on his path of good. I'd say hold on to this suit for future use, Victor. It might come in handy many more times in the future.